Today, Brady Lake is a quiet and peaceful community tucked away in the woods of Portage County. Viewing this tranquil setting, few people would guess that over 200 years ago, a wounded man hid in the southeast corner of this lake, desperately trying to avoid capture, torture, and certain death. This is the story of his daring escape. Today, many locations around the Kent area bear the name of Brady. However, his story has been lost throughout time.
A letter from General Bierce. The numerous traditions respecting Brady's leap across the Cuyahoga River and many other hair-breadth escapes and adventures of that old frontiersman grow more and more vague and conflicting with lapse of time. Even those which have been published at various times in the newspapers and elsewhere do not agree with each other nor with the most reliable oral tradition.
Despite these disagreements and various versions, it is believed that Samuel Brady came home from the Revolutionary War to find his father and younger brother were both attacked and killed by Indians. Brady then vowed vengeance on the Red Man.
After the war was over, why the Indians were still being a problem in this area, so Washington had Brady come to what was then known as the Ohio country, and in an attempt to put the uprising of the Indians down.
He was given command of a group of men of his choosing. They were called Brady's Rangers. He trained these men and used them to monitor Indian movement, warning settlers if they were in danger. If a settlement was attacked, they were to track the Indians and save any captive settlers. When word spread that there was a group possibly comprised of Mingos, Wyandots, and Senecas, Brady was ordered to take 40 of his men and scout out the situation. Brady and his men found the Indians camped south of Brady Lake. The Rangers decided to create an ambush similar to what the Indians successfully used against the whites. Brady split his troops into two groups, one in direct attack and the other awaiting an ambush. On Brady's signal, the Rangers rose from their positions, took aim, and fired. Approximately 10 Indian warriors fell, dead or wounded. Immediately upon firing, the Rangers retreated to a chosen location, prepared to fire, and waited as the Indians closed the gap between them. The Rangers fought the urge to fire and forced themselves to wait for Brady's signal. Brady aimed for the lead warrior and allowed him to get closer and closer. When the warrior was in 50 yards, the Rangers fired, but this time shots came from the line across the path and from the woods on either side. Even more Indians fell. Now the Rangers were to escape. The Rangers split up individually so that they wouldn't be easy to track. On this mission, only one out of the 40 Rangers was caught, Brady. Figuring most of his men would be heading east, Brady decided to run south. Brady came to a creek and began to cross it. About halfway across, Brady looked up and saw 5 Indians on the opposite bank. Being in no position to fight his way out, Brady raised his head and greeted the 2 Indians as they waded into the water and relieved him of his weapons.
And they took him capture, and because he was well known to them, they wanted him to suffer a little bit.
Enemies such as this were to undergo a prolonged execution by torture in front of as many Indians as possible. He was to be taken to the natives' capital, Half King's Town, for his highly public execution. The trip would take several days. They would stop at every tribal village on the way and make Brady run the gauntlet. The gauntlet was a form of torture comprised of 2 parallel lines of Indians, armed with switches, clubs, and branches. On average, gauntlets would reach about a quarter mile in length. The prisoner would then be forced to run between these lines as the Indians beat him when he ran by. This would sometimes result in death for the prisoner. At Honia, a village located where the Main Street Bridge is today, Brady was tied to a pole and heavily guarded. A squaw came to feed him. The Indians often fed their prisoners so that they would not die too quickly when being tortured. Brady ate hungrily, knowing that he would need his strength if he was going to make an escape. That night, under the watch of his guards, Brady slept fitfully. The next morning, Brady was once again given a bowl of food. All able men, women, and children formed the lines for the gauntlet. The elderly and women with babies stood by to watch. Brady was positioned at the starting point, and it was then that Brady thought of his escape plan. The Indians motioned to have Brady remove his shirt. He refused. When a native warrior stepped forward and forcibly removed his shirt, Brady punched him between the eyes, knocking him backwards.
The story goes that he did get away. He grabbed either a woman or a child and threw them into the fire to distract the Indians, and he took off running.
He ran northward along the Cuyahoga River, an area he had scouted in the past, and remembered the landmark Standing Rock. He knew the river narrowed approximately 300 yards south of that rock.
So we went back a little bit, took one running jump, and jumped the river right here, so the story goes. The place he jumped from was undercut on this west side with the water, and the place he landed on the east side was 3 feet lower than this. So they measured it in later years and decided he had jumped 21 feet, and that's quite a jump.
He crashed into the side of the bank and landed on a ledge 4 or 5 feet below the bank. As Brady pulled himself up, the pursuing Indians caught up, but then stopped, not willing to attempt the feat performed by Brady. They would have to find another location to cross. One Indian, out of frustration, raised his musket and shot Brady in the right thigh. Brady pulled himself up onto the bank and ran off through the woods. He had a big lead now, but he was leaving an easily trackable blood trail behind. He reached the lake just north of the village he had attacked only yesterday and jumped in, hiding beneath a log angled into the water. This eliminated the trailing of blood, but he knew this would be the first place the Indians would look. He looked across the lake and spied some low weeds. They didn't offer a lot of cover, but he knew this was his only chance. As Brady went to push off the log with his good leg, his leg went into the large hole on the side of the log. Brady saw it was big enough for him to fit into and managed to wedge himself inside the log where there was an air pocket for him to breathe. As soon as he concealed himself, Brady heard the Indians reach the lake. He listened as they searched around the lake and even stood on the log he was hiding in. After about an hour of searching, they gave up, assuming Brady drowned. Brady waited in the log until nightfall, easing himself out of the log and waiting in the shadows listening. Brady got out of the lake and worked his way home. There's a certain amount of controversy surrounding this story. It was passed down through word of mouth, and many thought it was merely a story.
We do know, there was a Captain Brady, and he was in this area. Whether he jumped, story says he did. We have no reason to disbelieve it.
And so, Brady's leap remains in time, retold and passed on each generation, sometimes forgotten, sometimes changed.
It's just one of the stories that are here, part of history.